the Japanese internment camps is so real. I don't know if you noticed, it's an article in the paper today, I think it is. It says that the Trump administration is now using those same camps to put immigrants and people trying to get into our country, and children. And I just wanted to say that when I listened to Mr. Raskin and I listened to our arguments, and then I heard Mr. Jordan say, he suggested that the true purpose of the amendment is to be able to argue that we are interfering with the Supreme Court. I don't want that muddled either. I want our committee to do what our committee is supposed to do. I want our Congress to do what it's supposed to do, and I want to preserve the power that the Founding Fathers gave us in their wisdom. I do not want it diluted. I don't want it power light. I want the full power that the Congress is supposed to have, and so I'm not going to be supportive of this, okay? Ms. Ocasio Cortez, strike the word.
Thank you. You know, so many of our folks across the aisle think that this is a debate about whether we should be asking who is a citizen or not in this country. The census is a constitutionally mandated operation that we are required to implement every 10 years. It is one of the most vital and sensitive things that we do in our government. Any change to the census, any addition of a question, usually takes 5 years of a process to make sure that it is vetted, that every word has been tested, to make sure that it is effective, because it is one of the most important things that we do. So it's not that I want to, this is not about whether or not I want to know who is a citizen in the United States or not. What I want to know is why this question was added, why 2 years have been shaved off of that 5-year process. I want to know why we have skipped every normal mandated procedure in testing how this question gets added in the census. I want to know why this question was magically added after we have seen that a political operative knew and detailed an intent to intimidate racial and immigrant communities for a partisan purpose, saying this will hurt Democrats and help Republicans. That's what I want to know. I want to know why why Secretary Ross continued to meet with people of disturbing political affiliations after his own administration warned him to stop. He came right here and I asked him, did you continue speaking with him after this? He told me no, we had an email, and he did. He did. I want to know why people like Chris Kobach, with a documented history of overseeing effects. He has a resume of voter suppression techniques in the state of Kansas. I want to know why folks like that have their fingerprints all over the most sensitive census operations that we have as a United States government. This determines who is here. This determines who has power in the United States of America. That is what we want to know. I want to know about corruption. That's what I want to know about, the racism and the very disturbing history that we're seeing here. That's what I want to know. And so we gave the opportunity to ask. We asked, why are all of these things happening? Why is all of this connected? Why are there so many people, everyone from Steve Bannon to Chris Kobach, having their fingerprints and their political intent all over the United States Census? Why? And what did we get? Nothing. No response. Stonewalling, we're getting obstruction, we're getting a lack of answers. I don't want to issue a subpoena. Nobody wants to be in a position where you have to issue a subpoena of an administration official, because we are a co-equal branch of government, and it should be expected that when we ask a question, we get a response. But when we don't, we have to do our job. No one wants to be in a position where we have to issue a subpoena. But today, because of the Secretary and because of the Attorney General's refusal to cooperate with a co-equal branch of government, we have no choice. This is about the rule of law. This is about the respect of our institutions, and this is about the power of all of us as a body, as the United States Congress, and the integrity of the government of the United States. Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
The gentlelady yield. Let me say this
Yes.
to the gentlelady. Thank you very much for your comments. When I became chairman of this committee, I made it very clear that I took the issuance of subpoenas very, very, very seriously. I don't know if you know it, but in the past, we have had chairmen that have literally put out hundreds of subpoenas. We've put out very, very few. And we've been very, very careful for the very reasons that you just stated. We see it as a very, very serious matter. And you're absolutely right. We have come to this point. And we need to be very clear. You're right. This is our job. And I would consider it legislative malpractice if we don't do our job. We are not sworn to the president. We're not sworn to a party. We're sworn to the Constitution. And so I want to thank you for your comments.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, and speaking on this amendment again, and while I respect the intent of trying to acknowledge the historic moment and the historic ruling that is before us and before the Supreme Court, I want to reiterate the sentiment that Mr. Raskin and Ms. Tlaib expressed, because there is a reason that our government is designed the way that it is, and it is because it is designed to acknowledge the flawed human nature in our grand experiment of self-governance. Unspeakable horrors have been executed by the United States in the name of citizenship, in the name of determining who is a citizen, and by citizen we mean who is a person in our democracy. That is what citizenship means. It is an acknowledgement of personhood in American democracy, an acknowledgement of power. And when I think about Supreme Court decisions with this, I think about Dred Scott. I think about Korematsu versus the United States, where the Supreme Court upheld Japanese internment regardless of the citizenship status of Japanese Americans. And how did that start? It started with the United States Census. We have laws on the books saying that information from the census cannot be used in any other way, that it must be confidential. And what happened? When the federal government, the executive branch, the president of the United States, I don't care if he was a Democrat, I don't care if he was a Republican, it was wrong. And what he did, he asked for information, and the Census Bureau broke the law and divulged information on zip codes where Japanese Americans were concentrated. And that information was used to intern American citizens and non-American citizens alike. And the Supreme Court upheld that. Dred Scott, a black man suing for his freedom, came right before the United States Supreme Court. And what they said was that the U.S. Constitution did not give African American citizenship. They have gotten it wrong. The Supreme Court has gotten it wrong. And unspeakable violations of human rights and civil liberties have been executed by the United States government in light of that. And I can tell you, with this Supreme Court argument, they could very well get it wrong again. And I don't even want to think about how far that could be pushed. But that is not even what the question is at hand today. Because what this subpoena is about and what this contempt is about is the fact that we have asked for information and there is a refusal to comply with a co-equal branch and our power. That's all that this is about. That's all that this is about. And so we have to execute our power and hold that power to account and vote on contempt. So the reason I do not want to support this amendment is because I don't want to muddy our waters. I want to make sure that we are laser focused, that we are effective, that we are efficient, that we don't add any bloat, and we do not confuse people as to why we are doing what we need to do. We are voting on contempt because we need to do our jobs and people are refusing to comply, and because we have given no choice. Regardless of what's being held in front of the Supreme Court, regardless of what's happening in the executive branch, we need to do our job, and that is what this vote is about today.
Gentlelady yield.
Will the gentlelady yield?
Yes, I'll yield to the chairman.
Your statement about
The first daughter is taking hits by critics tonight for her involvement, some would say over-involvement, in her father's Asia trip. Officially, Ivanka Trump is listed as an advisor of the president, but she appeared to take on the role of unofficial diplomat in Japan and North Korea, inserting herself into meetings, photo ops, and conversations. She visited the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea along with President Trump and stepped across the border. Earlier, she gave reporters an on-camera briefing after her father met with both the Indian and Japanese leaders, something usually handled by an official from the National Security Council. The French government even posted this Instagram video of Ms. Trump trying to engage in a talk with several attendees at the G20 summit in Japan, including British Prime Minister Theresa May and Christine Lagarde, the head of the International Monetary Fund, as well as France's president. They all seem confused as to what exactly she's doing there.
Social justice.
It's all, yeah.
As soon as you start talking about the economic aspect of it, though, a lot of people start listening who wouldn't otherwise listen.
And the same with the defense side of it.
Yeah.
In terms of the whole sort of ecosystem. It's been very male-dominated.
So what to make of this? Joining us is CNN senior political analyst David Gergen. David, I wonder what went through your mind when you watched that video. I mean, was she actually part of that conversation?
She seemed to be, and Christine Lagarde did not seem to be terribly happy about it, nor did the others. But nonetheless, Anderson, listen, to back up for a minute, this country very much needs more women in high-level diplomacy jobs, and we've had 4 so far: the 2 Condi Rice and Susan Rice and Hillary Clinton and Madeleine Albright. They all earned their way to the top. They all earned their way to the table. 3 of them have PhDs, 1 Yale Law. They all work for years in foreign policy, and they were professionals by the time they began to run high-level diplomacy. Ivanka Trump simply hasn't paid her dues. She's there as a result of nepotism on part of the president. It would be fine if she went if Melania is not going, the First Lady is not going, Ivanka went in her place. That would be fine. But to go and be treated like a high-level professional really insults their foreign service. It insults what they do in life, and it sends a message to the other heads of state that this White House is playing by different rules that nobody seems to understand, but are not treated, not respected by others. They're keeping silent about it, but they don't respect it.
I mean, if this was a Clinton administration and it was Chelsea Clinton doing this, I think the criticism would be the same, although probably louder from the Republican side. I want to play another video from this weekend taken at the Blue House in South Korea. It's Ivanka Trump, and in the back, trying to find somewhere to stand, is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Which just, I don't know. It's the kind of thing that happens when the president's daughter is stepping into these kind of roles on the world stage, I guess.
Yeah.
It's not just Ivanka Trump. The former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson reportedly told Congress last month that Jared Kushner had dinner with Mexico's foreign secretary entirely without Tillerson's knowledge, essentially going around him in matters of diplomacy.
Yeah, and you can imagine that only hastened Tillerson's move out the door. And Jared Kushner is also entrusted with the Middle East. He's come up with this economic development plan that so far has been shrugged off by people in the Middle East, leaders in the Middle East. The Palestinians won't even meet with him. Once before in our history, Anderson, Franklin Roosevelt appointed Eleanor Roosevelt early in Roosevelt's first term to a position in the government, to a civil service position. It was a disaster. And she rapidly stepped away from it and realized she had a different role to play as a member of the First Family, as First Lady. Ivanka has a role to play, but not this one.
Yeah, it's also not clear what she is qualified to really be discussing on the world stage. I mean, what is it she brings to the table other than being, having, I guess, a shoe or clothing company and being the president's daughter?
In the vibrant city of Osaka.
That's absolutely true. And when Jared has a back channel to the Mexican foreign minister and Ivanka has channels going down to one place or another, it undercuts the top people. And one of the things that happens to other countries, if you're in a country that sends it's a friend of the United States, and you send a top-level ambassador, that ambassador's job is to be able to speak to the government, the U.S. government, and to know who to speak to. And now we're sending out signals to other countries. We don't know who you ought to speak to. You can speak to Jared. You might speak to Ivanka. You might want to speak to John Bolton, but does he really know what's going on? Who speaks for Trump? And that we're already in a volatile administration. It just causes massive confusion when the children, through a form of nepotism, are being put into positions where they seem to speak for the president, but nobody is quite sure.
Yeah. I mean, John Bolton's in Mongolia, which, I mean, I would love to go to Mongolia, but it's not exactly where the action is. David Gergen.
It's not.
Yeah.
Do you think it's for a reason? You have to believe that he just sort of wanted to take a powder and get the heck out of there.
Yeah. David Gergen.
And not go to the Korean trip.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Just ahead, we remember champion of 9/11 first responders, retired NYPD detective Lou Alvarez, who died just days after delivering a powerful plea to Congress to replenish the fund for other victims who worked at Ground Zero. We mentioned this at the top in the context of legislation to help 9/11 first responders. A key advocate of that legislation, a hero, died over the weekend. Luis Alvarez, a retired NYPD detective, was just 53 years old. The cause of death was complications of colon cancer linked to his time spent at Ground Zero. 3 weeks ago, he joined other first responders and comedian Jon Stewart in a very public plea for Congress to fully fund the Victim Compensation Fund, which was in danger of running out of money. The NYPD commissioner tweeted, quote, "His strength, physical, mental, and emotional led us all, and we vow to never forget him or his legacy, which was simply to have others do what's right." Chris Cuomo joins us now. Chris, it's just the fact that he's, spent some of his last time testifying in front of Congress is just it's testimony to the kind of guy he was.
His mettle. Listen, obviously, our hearts have to go out to the family. He's got 3 sons. Alvarez was the American dream, Coop. He was born in Cuba, came here, grew up in Queens, wanted to serve. His family believed that he should serve and give back. He didn't want to be anywhere after 9/11 except down at Ground Zero. And we all know the reporting back then. We knew it couldn't be right, that air. They were misled. They've been tossed around all this time. Now the House has passed this bill. Hopefully it happens in the Senate. But what a shame that we treat our best to the worst of us.
Yeah. What are you working on tonight?
So we're going to bring on a surrogate from Kamala Harris and talk about this switch in the polls. And I see a couple of things in there that I haven't heard discussed that much yet. There seems to be a big challenge for all the Democrats on health care. I think they have to figure out what their way forward is. We'll take that on tonight. And we'll also take on what happened on the border today, and what didn't happen.
All right, Chris, see you in a few minutes, about 6 minutes from now. Coming up, President Trump began boasting about his charitable giving. Why is he going to be mad for the disgraced Trump Foundation? The Ridiculous explains.
Now, speaking of that, what a doozy of a trip this was to the Far East. You talk about low expectations and yet still being disappointed. Who made more headlines here? At the G20, the president or his daughter? This is not about media. This is about matter of fact. Ivanka crossed all kinds of lines, according to the biographer who's already written a book on what she means in this current environment. She's here next with an addendum. Vicky Ward. Look, no matter how you want to define the new normal, this that we saw this weekend, no good. You're supposed to see the president on the world stage, but to just have his daughter, and I'm not attacking her, I'm sure she's a great, smart business person, but she's not a diplomat, and she has no business being at the G20. And if she wasn't at her father's side, she was rubbing elbows with foreign leaders, and there's a video going all over the internet where they seemed to be discomfited, uncomfortable with her presence. She even overshadowed the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. He had to struggle for a place in a group photo. She had to step aside. Doesn't work. No foreign policy experience. And yet, she's able to go where few Americans can simply because you have this family situation where it does not belong. Nepotism. Okay? And it's a problem. Let's bring in Vicky Ward, investigative journalist, best-selling author of Kushner, Inc., joins me now. And, of course, it threads through the influence. But this is no disrespect to her. I'm sure the father wants her there, so she's doing it. I'm sure she's fine. She has no business being there, and this president needs the best around him.
Right. Well, I think it's really dangerous, Chris, because basically what this weekend has done is send a signal to leaders around the world that the American president can be manipulated through his family. And that is incredibly dangerous, particularly when those family members, Ivanka and her husband Jared, have not passed Senate confirmation hearings. They were not, intelligence experts didn't even think they should have a security clearance because of their conflicts of interest. I was reading again today the transcript of the remarks former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson gave to Congress last week, where he talked about the need to have one foreign policy, the need for the Secretary of State or the special envoys to be the ones who negotiated with outside leaders to be effective, and how dangerous it was to have, in his particular testimony, he talked about Jared Kushner, but how dangerous for this country it is to have Jared or Ivanka, who are unqualified and inexperienced, being channels to their father for negotiators who can manipulate them.
And you don't know what the priorities are. And again, I'm not painting with the brush of anything felonious or anything like that. However, the ethical standard is supposed to be semblance of impropriety. You don't do anything that even someone might think is wrong. And yet you have Ivanka cutting deals with her business that supposedly she's removed from in China during a trade battle. We heard from Tillerson about what he thought was going on with Kushner and who he was meeting with behind his back and why it was always somehow business related to Kushner's business. It just sends the wrong signal.
It completely sends the wrong signal. And I also have to say that, the people who wrote that, well, let's not be too hard on Ivanka because this, she does, after all, talk up women's empowerment. But really, Chris, you have to think, how empowered does she look as a woman to be standing there in a position like that simply because she is somebody's daughter? That is not a very feminist message. In fact, it's the absolute opposite. And I think this weekend she has managed to undermine her the president's cabinet, the Secretary of State, and the National Security Secretary. It's really troubling.
Do you believe that the deeper you go, the more problematic it is, or does it end for you with, look, he's my father, he wants me there, this is an opportunity that we would have never had, so my husband and I, that's why we're there? Or do you still believe, because of the reporting and what you continue to learn, that there is more of an agenda at play?
No, I think that this whole, what we see again and again in plain sight is, a White House that is a family real estate business. And, the reporting in my book was really all about the deal making that was going on behind Rex Tillerson's back in the Middle East, in real time. There's a line in my book that I was really surprised people didn't pick up on. The first February of this administration, a man called Sheikh HBJ is his nickname, from Qatar, went to see President Trump at Mar-a-Lago. They had a private meeting. This was in February 2017. He went back to the Middle East. He said, basically, this White House is open for business. And every time the president uses his family, we all know that the Trump is a family real estate business. It sends a signal to the rest of the world that America, the American presidency, is for sale.
And also, look, an important point for people is, I'm not accusing Ivanka, I'm not accusing Jared, but you don't have to. The standard is, if it looks bad, it is bad. And that's what's been violated, and it's going to create concerns. And we're hearing about them right now. Vicky Ward, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Chris.
To be continued, ... So, another story for you. Barely old enough to drive. Learner's permit, but man, did you see what she did at Wimbledon? Who is this new young star? The star that she took on, what it means to her and to history. Wow, story next.
Tonight, the White House is defending Ivanka Trump's high-profile involvement in the just-wrapped-up G20 summit in Japan, where the first daughter and presidential advisor sparked controversy by inserting herself as a would-be diplomat. Our political correspondent Sarah Murray is here in the Situation Room. Sarah, some national security officials are bristling at the prominent role that she played.
That's right, Wolf. And, we're used to Ivanka Trump working on women's economic empowerment issues. She's made that a mainstay of her work at the White House, but she certainly raised eyebrows when she acted as a de facto diplomat on her father's latest swing through Asia. As Ivanka Trump tried to jump into conversation with world leaders, including the Canadian Prime Minister, the French President, and the British Prime Minister, she created a viral moment.
As soon as you start talking about the economic aspect of it, though, a lot of people start listening who wouldn't otherwise listen.
And the same with the defense side of it, in terms of the whole sort of ecosystem. It's been very male-dominated.
Critics say International Monetary Fund Managing Director Christine Lagarde's look said it all. On the president's swing through Asia for the G20, the first daughter assumed an unusually prominent role on the world stage.
Thank you, Prime Minister Abe, for hosting the G20 summit in the vibrant city of Osaka. And thank you for your steadfast commitment to women's economic empowerment.
The 37-year-old, whose official title is advisor to the president, left some national security officials bristling, suggesting she was stepping into a role more commonly occupied by diplomats.
A lot of really positive things are happening.
As the president held an impromptu meeting at the Korean border with Kim Jong-un, Ivanka stood nearby. She shook the North Korean dictator's hand and later told a reporter the whole thing was surreal. In a photo op with the U.S. delegation and their South Korean counterparts, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo shuffled behind the group, looking for an opening, as Ivanka and her husband, Jared Kushner, beamed in the foreground. When she spotted Pompeo, Ivanka stepped to the side. Tonight, Democrats are sounding the alarm about a foreign policy neophyte taking center stage. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio Cortez tweeting, "It may be shocking to some, but being someone's daughter actually isn't a career qualification. It hurts our diplomatic standing when the president phones it in and the world moves on." But the president seemed thrilled to have Ivanka take top billing alongside Pompeo.
Has anyone ever heard of Ivanka? All right, come up, Ivanka. Come on. She's going to steal the show. She'll steal it. What a beautiful couple. Mike, Beauty and the Beast, Mike.
Ivanka also took to the spotlight in a video published by the White House, offering a readout of the president's trilateral meetings with India and Japan.
We are here at the G20 in Osaka, and the Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe just concluded a meeting with the president talking about 5G technology.
That responsibility is usually left to a national security staffer via a written statement.
It's been a productive morning, to say the least.
While Ivanka has little formal diplomatic experience, she does have experience doing business abroad, including in India, one of the Trump organization's top markets. Now, Ivanka Trump is, of course, formally on leave from her role at the Trump organization so she can work in her father's White House. And the White House did put out a statement today, Wolf, saying in part, "It is sad but not shocking that the haters choose to attack Ivanka Trump." As for Christine Lagarde and her star turn in that video, she has not commented on it, but she did pin a tweet to her Twitter page showing her smiling next to Ivanka.
Sarah Murray with that report. Thank you very much, Sarah, for that. Just ahead, after his historic meeting with Kim Jong-un, is President Trump now considering letting the North Korean dictator keep some of his nuclear weapons? Plus, there's breaking news.
Father's trip to Asia, meeting with world leaders, and assuming somewhat of a diplomatic role. While back in Washington, national security officials bristled. We have CNN's new reporting on this next. Playing diplomat on the world stage, the president's daughter, Ivanka, taking a central role on her father's G20 trip. In Japan, the first daughter was seen several times asserting herself in conversations and photo ops with world leaders, going well beyond her normal duties as a senior aide, and once again underscoring her unusual and unprecedented prominence within this administration. There was this moment when the U.S. and South Korean delegations lined up for a photo op, leaving Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to wonder where he fits into all of this. Literally. Watch. Now, the president even giving the Pompeo-Ivanka duo a nickname at one point.
What a beautiful couple. Mike, Beauty and the Beast, Mike.
And then there was this awkward moment that has now gone viral. Ivanka Trump adding her 2 cents to a conversation featuring some of America's biggest allies. French President Emmanuel Macron, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, British Prime Minister Theresa May, and IMF Chair Christine Lagarde.
Yes, but it's all social justice. And if
It's all, yeah. As soon as you start talking about the economic aspect of it, though, a lot of people start listening who wouldn't otherwise listen.
And the same with the defense side of it.
Yeah.
In terms of the whole sort of ecosystem. It's been very male-dominated. So.
The White House also tweeted a video of Ivanka doing a readout of her father's meeting with 2 world leaders, which is a job usually carried out by a national security staffer, in a written statement.
The Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe just concluded a meeting with the president talking about 5G technology, particularly with a focus on its security implications. Really important meeting, and lay the foundation for a subsequent productive conversation, a one-on-one meeting between the president and Prime Minister Modi.
So what is Ivanka's role, and does it now include diplomat? Let's bring in Caitlin Collins at the White House and Kate Bennett. Both of them cover the White House for us. So, Caitlin, it's notable Ivanka seemed to be given this equal billing as top cabinet officials were here. No one is questioning her intelligence, but they are questioning her qualifications, if there are security issues, if she'd be in this position if she weren't the president's kid.
Well, and there's questions about what role it is that she's playing here, because, of course, women's empowerment is something that is in Ivanka Trump's portfolio, and that was a very overarching theme you saw at the G20 summit. So it's not a surprise in that sense when she participated in those discussions. The questions and the criticisms that we're hearing from current and former national security officials is the role she played in a foreign policy sense, from something as small as being in the way when the Secretary of State was trying to get in the photo, to those bigger things where she's giving a readout of meetings that the president is having with other world leaders. Those are the questions that people are raising about her role. And though for some time there's always been a lot of scrutiny and speculation about what the job is that Ivanka Trump does in the White House, because she is the president's child, as there would be scrutiny about any president's child having a top-tier job in the West Wing, there are questions about the role she played with these other world leaders when it comes to foreign policy discussions, and what exactly the extent of that is, and whether or not she's qualified to be in those meetings.
And Kate, the First Lady, it's worth noting, wasn't on this trip. But it's not like Ivanka Trump took her role. She wasn't a shadow First Lady. She was more of a shadow Secretary of State, even though there was a Secretary of State there.
Right. I mean, it's this weird, unprecedented role. We've talked about it before, and it's always interesting to me when Melania Trump is not on the trip, we do see Ivanka Trump more. She spoke to the troops. She was sort of had a more presence, a stronger presence next to her dad. I do think, though, there's something when the president says, oh, here comes my daughter, she's going to steal the show, Beauty and the Beast, teasing about Pompeo and Ivanka. There's that familiarity there that sort of is a little cringy, because you want to see her, as Caitlin just said, as this foreign policy person, as part of the administration, a senior advisor. But then there's this daddy-daughter relationship that plays in as well. And I do think that she fills in for the First Lady, which also is a little strange too in these other roles. So it's unprecedented, and we're sort of trying to figure it out. But Ivanka Trump, I think, reading the room, having some self-awearness about that is something that she's always sort of, been above and hasn't really necessarily done.
Yeah, we saw that. We've seen her before, Ivanka, taking a big role. She sat in for a short time with her dad at the G20 summit in 2017. That raised eyebrows. The White House, tell us about, Caitlin, what the White House is saying here. They say she's being attacked. How do they feel about all this?
Yeah, they're pushing back strongly, saying that she's being attacked simply because she is the president's daughter, even though they're noting she's also a senior advisor to him. But of course, the questions are about what these meetings she's doing and compared to what other officials are doing. Because at one point, when the president was sitting down with Kim Jong-un one-on-one during that meeting at the DMZ, Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner went into one of the shelters and crossed into North Korea. So the president wasn't the only person who made those historic first steps into North Korea. His own daughter, even though it was behind closed doors and away from the cameras, also crossed into North Korea, while you saw the acting chief of staff, Mick Mulvaney, milling around outside. The Secretary of State Mike Pompeo largely remained in the background during most of that visit until the president took questions at the end. Of course, the White House and people close to the president will say this is representative of what Ivanka is to her father, such a close, trusted advisor that she has been for so many years. But of course, it's going to raise questions about exactly the role she's playing. And also, you're seeing just how much more access and and leverage Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump have now that Mick Mulvaney is the chief of staff. Because when John Kelly was here, he tried to curb that access some. And I do not think he would have been someone who was hanging around outside while they were crossing into North Korea. And so you're just seeing the different role that they're playing now that Mick Mulvaney is running the West Wing.
Yeah, he seems to realize that they will always be there, and he should accommodate that. Caitlin Collins, thank you so much. Kate Bennett, really appreciate your reporting online as well. Thank you.